Okay, everyone. It is 5:01 and I'm going to call Racine County Government Services meeting to order on this day of December 4th, 2025. The first thing we're going to have do is a youth and governance. Read a statement.
Hello, we are members of the Racine County Youth and Governance Program, and we will be participating in tonight's meeting. This program serves to empower youth in Racine County by encouraging us to participate in local government. We have agreed to abide by the applicable standards of conduct that would govern any elected county board member. While we are encouraged to participate and are allowed to have a non-binding advisory vote on matters before the committee, all formal action taken by this committee will be based solely on the binding votes made by county board supervisors.
Thank you ever so much. Also, let's note for attendance, Supervisor Coleman is excused. If we can note Supervisor Coleman as excused, but Supervisor Kelly and Supervisor Baranth, I have not heard from. So we may have to mark them unexcused if they don't show up late. And let's move on. We have public comment on our agenda, which we don't have public comment here. And I have no comments. And next is an actionable item, which is approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Do we have a motion?
So move.
It's been properly motioned. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. Any comments? No comments. Youth and governance, how do you wish to vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Committee, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, it has been approved. Now for new business, first on our agenda is the presentation from District Attorney Hanson. Thank you.
I'm not on the county network and maybe that's why. I'm not sure. So anyway, I'll try to figure that out better for next time. So for those of you I haven't met, because I haven't met the youth and governance kids yet, I'm Tricia Hanson. I'm the district attorney. I'm just starting my 31st year and I've been the DA now for the last 10. I am in a really solid place right now in terms of my staff. For the first time in a long time, I can say I'm fully staffed, which there were some pandemic years there where it was pretty dire. But fortunately, we are an interesting hybrid between county and state. All of the attorneys in my office, as well as myself, are paid by the state. My attorney and staff and myself are state employees, but I'm county elected and my support staff all works for the county. So we're sort of just this strange hybrid of state and county merging together. And I'm on a state network for computing and computer services, but yet we have county printers. So anyway, we make this work. And so I'm happy to say that things are moving along pretty well for me at the office right now. I brought with me today just like a 3-year case data for you, just to kind of see the kind of numbers that we're putting through our district attorney's office. And I won't, go through them individually, but if there are any questions about them, I'm certainly here to answer them. I think what you can see is that we're, regardless of what you hear in the media and from different outlet sources, that crime is this, crime is up, crime is down. I think those numbers are easily interchangeable and crime shifts. It's very cyclical and it shifts. What you can see from these numbers is I started at 2022 because obviously 20 and 21 were pretty unusual for the entire country. But I think you can see our numbers are pretty steady. I added in, I was supposed to be here in November and that was at the peak of budget. So I appreciated everybody giving me an opportunity to come in December. So I did not run the numbers through today, but you can see, I think even 25 is going to be pretty similar in terms of the number of cases we get referred to us from law enforcement, as well as the number of cases that we actually file in the criminal justice system. I also included today some numbers about victim witness. Um, this budget cycle, the county board was kind enough to restore a position that the state had cut from my victim witness office. And so just to get an idea of how many victims of crime come in through the DA's office and how many of them we actually service. Because there's a lot of victims who we never hear back from. We reach out and they don't want to be a part of the process. And that's fine too. That's their right under the Wisconsin Constitution. So we respect that as well. But just to try to give you an idea of the work they're doing in addition to the work of the attorneys in my office. We've also, for the first time in Racine County history, starting in 2020, which again was a very unusual time, we started a diversion program here in Racine County, and that's expanded to some other areas. So you can see, starting in March of 2020, we started the diversion program, and what we've done through today, it's on the bottom left. And so that every case that you see there where we have a success is a case that didn't go through the criminal justice system. So those are people who um, maybe never saw the jail, have participated in some kind of alternative programming that relates directly to the crime they were alleged to have committed. So, for example, if it's a first time retail theft, we try to send people outside of the criminal justice system to appreciate what they did was wrong, to do some cognitive behavioral therapy where your thinking changes, perhaps make restitution for something they stole, um, and then avoid having their name on CCAP, avoid that charge ever coming to light that follows them down the road. Um, we send domestic violence cases there. Many times, first time domestic violence between couples is not a breaking point for a relationship. These are people who had a bad night, called the police, but do want to continue to be partners. And so rather than say, okay, well, we're going to give them a pass this time because it was the first time, we try to engage them in some kind of counseling, some kind of anger management, or at least a process to rethink how they behaved or appreciate that maybe it was drugs or alcohol that caused them to behave a certain way. And the hope is they will never come back. They will be better partners to one another and engage in a healthy mutual relationship versus something that's destructive and lands somebody in jail. Um, so those are the kind of things we've been trying to do. Um, Criminal traffic diversion is actually a part of a grant, a re-entry grant from the jail. So that grant services people who are in jail as well as people who are out. And the goal there is really to take folks who either get in trouble because they are driving without a license or they're driving while they're revoked, to help them navigate the system to getting a driver's license, um, which doesn't sound on its face hard. I mean, we see kids at 16 navigating that system, but when you've had a bunch of tickets and your driver's license has been taken away because of poor decisions you made, it's not an easy, simple process. So we, make people aware. Here's the tickets you owe. Here's what you need to do to get a payment plan. Here's what you can do to reinstate your driver's license. Or for those who had a drunk driving and didn't know what to do to get their license back after they served the revocation of that drunk driving, we get them engaged in an AODA assessment. We get them involved in programming or help them get the intoxilizer device installed in their car, so that they can regain their driver's license. And the goal is to get them back on the road legally, so people can work and take care of their children and get their kids to school or wherever that needs to be. So we've had, we get about half of those folks being successful. That's a tough road sometimes. If you 10 years or 20 years and you let the tickets pile up and you never paid them, sometimes it's out of people's reach. You can also lose your driver's license if you've had a judgment entered against you for a traffic accident when you didn't have insurance. And some of those judgments are substantial $20,000, $30,000 that have to be paid before you could get your driver's license back. And, we give them 6 months. So that's not always a goal we can accomplish. And for those who cannot obtain a driver's license, they're all made to take at least the behind the wheel, or not the behind the wheel, excuse me, the written road test. So we're at least trying to make even folks who cannot get a driver's license safer on the road. You can take that test even if you're not going to get your license, even if you're not a citizen. We take non-English speaking folks and we make them at least get a proficiency for safety to make everybody else safer on the road. That grant will run out, I think we have another year. So unfortunately, that's a program that might go away, but it's, I think, been definitely worth it while we've been engaged in it. So, I'm really here, I guess, to answer questions. I think for those of you certainly on the county board, you're familiar with the process and what we do at the district attorney's office. Um, it's challenging in that we have all these police agencies across the county, and I have to get them all to come to one place, which is not always an easy task, gentlemen. But no, we have good working relationships with all of our police agencies. It's just, sometimes they do things differently in one place than another. But we work hard on all achieving the same goal. So, like I tell people all the time, in my entire career, I can count on two hands the number of people who went away to prison who should never be released again. Most of the people we see are folks who have either are on hard times. I would say probably 90% are influenced by drugs and alcohol and make really poor decisions. So our job has to be not only to facilitate victims and getting justice for them, but it has to be to making sure we're putting people back in the community in a better place than where they started. And so we try to hold ourselves to that goal, because the only way I'm going to get these numbers to come down is if people stop committing crimes. So if I can leave them, if they can leave the criminal justice system a little better than when they came in, my chance of reducing recidivism goes up and maybe these numbers come down. Unfortunately, I haven't been successful yet, but we're at least holding the line. And I think that's even saying a lot in today's environment. I also included in this case, or this case data, the number of gun cases that we have handled. It's a particular area of interest, particular to Racine County and the city of Racine. And I also included domestic violence, which again, we have more domestic violence homicides this year than we've had gun homicides this year. And so I think it's important that that's always on people's radar, because it's a situation that it's difficult to know what goes on in people's homes. And when it rises to the level where someone dies, then we all know, but did we know sooner and could we have done something about that? So I tried to highlight kind of what the issues of the day are for what we see and what's important. And you can see that 2022 was a really rough year for gun crimes. Um, 23 and 24 are reflections of the kind of year we've had since, where we came together and collaborated with the city and with the school district to do the Violent Crime Reduction Initiative. That no longer is something I participate in. It's kind of changed its focus and how it operates. But our numbers are down for 25, so I think that's encouraging. And I'm certainly encouraged by that. But I also will stress to you that those numbers came down from 22 because of a lot of hard work and a lot of effort by Racine County and the Racine County Sheriff's Office. Those numbers would not be where they are today if it wasn't for the work that they did. So I always want to give them a shout out as to that effort. So if you have any questions, I'm here.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Committee questions? Supervisor Preisker?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for the data. My impression before you presented this was that there were large increases over the past few years. So I'm surprised to see that they're relatively steady. Um, so is that a result of the diversion tactics? Because it seems like it's not a complete correlation, but the number of cases diverted seems to have gone up a lot with a high degree of success. So is that taking away from the numbers on the top third of the page?
Yes. And almost to our detriment, the last budget cycle, for the first time in, I don't know, 10 years, the governor awarded additional positions to certain counties with need. And I didn't meet that criteria because I had diverted cases away. And I don't get credit for diverting cases in their weighted system for caseload analysis. So for example, Kenosha got 2 and I got none. So I it caused me to volunteer to be on the committee to determine how we weight cases, because I think you should consider diversion cases in what we do. Someone has reviewed that case, someone has taken the time. For every case we don't issue, someone has had to take a look at that case and make a decision about where it goes. So I agreed to be on the committee that decides those criteria so that I make sure that counties like ours, who are trying to do something for people, get the credit they deserve for that. But yes, I think it is a pretty good correlation.
Thanks. I mean, if you added them together, then maybe there is an increase.
Right.
And if that, if that's the case, when I look at the sheriff's calls, their calls have been relatively steady. So is it that they're answering the same number of calls, but more of the calls they're answering are involving criminal behavior? That they're not just getting cats out of trees,
That's
anymore.
that's what I feel like is happening, but I would have to get Travis to confirm to me that's what's happening,
I'm just,
because I'm not a data person.
I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah, but I bet Travis could tell us exactly what's correlated.
All right, thanks.
That would sure be interesting. All right, Supervisor Trotter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Trish, the acronyms on here, fill me in.
Where are we at?
Well, let's just, CHIPS, what does that stand for, please? Can we
Sorry.
just run through these, what they stand
can.
for?
I'm
please?
sorry, I should have
That's
been
all
more
right.
clear. CHIPS is Children in Need of Protection and Services.
Thank you.
I will tell you that those numbers are a little bit startling to me. I have some questions about what's going on there, because I don't feel like we've suddenly created a whole new field of parents who are super qualified.
Yeah, I mean,
But that's
those,
probably a
right.
better question for Hope, but that one gave
Yep.
me some pause. TPR is termination of parental rights. And that one again is a little startling, but there are some other factors I can attribute that to. Um, the JV is for juvenile delinquency.
Yep.
So that's kids who are committing crimes. TR is traffic cases.
Okay.
My office prosecutes county traffic tickets and state patrol, because they don't have their own separate municipal courts. So for example, the sheriff's department writes a ticket on I-94. My staff handles that. The sheriff's department writes a ticket for Union Grove under that contract, and it goes to the Union Grove Muni Court. So that's the difference there.
One second, Trish. Supervisor Rossi, did you get one of these? Okay.
I
Okay.
caught
thank
him
you.
right at the end.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay. thanks.
So, and when I'm saying TR cases that we received, 3,182 is the contested number of tickets. So if someone just sends in their check and pays their ticket,
It's not.
right, or they just forget about it and don't show up, that's not reflected in that number.
Gotcha.
So they write, this is maybe 30%, maybe 30% of tickets that are written in a calendar year. CT is criminal traffic, and that number has gone down because of the diversion program. So that's 100% because of those tickets that we don't send to court. CM is criminal misdemeanor. CF is criminal felony. DV is domestic violence. And then the gun crimes I spelled out.
Going back to, the federal offenses, the, federal crimes,
Federal
not federal,
felony.
felony.
Okay.
I said federal. The, how are we doing with the minimum stay in the jails? I have hearing things on the streets that people are spending too much time on the federal end in the jail systems.
Felony?
Yes. And that seems to be in my wheelhouse where it drives up the costs.
Yeah.
Okay. Where are we with that? And how can you and I have talked about this before.
Mhm.
I know we have. How can we improve that?
So I don't know where we're at today. I don't
Right.
know the average.
I get it.
stay, number of beds nights, but the biggest barrier that we have to progressing our cases right now is a lack of defense attorneys.
Okay.
There are folks who go 6 months without a lawyer. We have one case that's at a year, and it's a bad homicide. You know, the private bar attorneys can say no, and they do because they don't want this case. But we have a terrible problem right now where the state public defender, anybody who's eligible for their services can apply. They have a maximum number of cases they have to take per year. So unlike my office that has to take in every case that comes to me and do something, they can say, oh, well, we're pretty full right now, so we're going to farm this out to a private bar lawyer that's willing to take a public defender appointment. So I always liken it to a tea kettle.
Mhm.
So when the tea kettle starts to whistle, that whistle just tells me, oh, I have more work to do. At the public defender's office, it says, go find some other lawyers to help you. The number of other lawyers to help has dwindled. In addition to that, the state public defender has a new policy regarding what cases are conflicts for them. So we have certain rules as lawyers that I can't represent. For example, a husband and a wife who have opposite positions at the same time. So they have a process by which they determine if their lawyers have a conflict on a case, which means they can't represent them. Right now, they're at about 50% of their cases they consider a conflict. So half of the cases that go to the public defender, they don't take because of conflict. And others because they just don't have, their staff is full, their caseload is full. So that, 50% of criminal defendants who are indigent and eligible for a state paid attorney are also the same indigent people who can't post their bond, which means more days in the jail. So, it's not a, it used to be an issue of, oh, we can't get the discovery out fast enough. We can't progress the cases fast enough because of things on our end. We've resolved those issues with our software from Axon and our database from the state. We're very fast about turning things over. But now people wait a really long time to get a lawyer appointed to their case. And I would say the majority of people who come into the criminal justice system are either indigent or our criminal behavior is what they live on in terms of their revenue stream and not reportable, so they look indigent on paper. That's our biggest issue right now with the jail.
Thank you. Did we not as a state just increase the public defender
Yes.
amount? That went from what, $50, $60 to 100?
It was $40
40.
set in 1986. It was changed 2 years ago to $100, which is probably too low today.
Mhm.
Because those private attorneys that take the cases are also, that's all they get. So if you have an office and a secretary, that $100 is supposed to cover all of your expenses. We just run out of people who are willing to take the cases.
Yeah, and maybe we should get up to Madison and lobby.
We
Huh?
need some defense lawyers. That's what we
Maybe.
need. Most
Or
kids
to the
don't
law
want a criminal
schools, or
justice
to the law schools to
Yeah.
convince the young youth coming out of law school to start there.
Give
So,
that a try.
yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you very much.
It's a hard sell though. You spend a lot of time in the jail and
Yeah.
you have clients who maybe are not very helpful or cooperative with you. So I get their frustration level, but it's a huge need right now.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
I had oh my goodness, I'd ran into Judge Boyle and had this discussion a little bit. He did say that there are some judges that are lobbying or working with legislators right now. There's not much traction, pretty much about that conflict, to question what they're defining as conflict. And so I am just curious though, from your end, looking at that, knowing that there are individuals sitting in jail, I thought there is some possible constitutional violations, whether it's for speedy trial or having them sitting there without an attorney or a possibility of one, and how long we're keeping them in there. Does that then, knowing that this is happening, does the DA's office do anything different?
Um, not from a charging perspective,
No.
but when someone comes through and perhaps the initial bond was set at, I'm just going to pick a number. Let's say the initial bond was set at $1,000. And we get to the preliminary hearing and that person hasn't posted bond and they don't have a lawyer. If it's a nonviolent offense, we are generally inclined to agree that the bond should be lowered.
Mm.
We have asked for example, less testing, like we don't request testing necessarily in all the marijuana cases because that's another expense for folks. Um, I can't let that I can't let that be a part of my charging decision, but it can be a factor in how we decide the case. Or, for example, if a defendant sat for 90 days on a charge where we wouldn't have asked for more than 90 days, when they get a lawyer, then the offer is, okay, let's get this on the calendar so we can do a credit for time served kind of recommendation and get people moving, rather than having them come back and serve more time on the back end. So we're cognizant of it. I've even gone so far as to, we have defendants who are saying now, I'd like to be able to represent myself because they want to get their case moving. Now, is that a great idea on a felony? It is not. But I have personally negotiated a couple of cases. Now, mind you, they were a little more savvy in terms of their criminal status to be able to talk to me about it, where I felt comfortable because they knew the routine. But I've gone in the side room and said, listen, what do we have to do here? You know how to do this. You've been here before. And I've settled those cases and they've come out and the judge has to make a finding that they're competent to represent themselves. And I certainly don't want to make people representing themselves the standard for us, because it's not the best way to handle things. But we've done it and we'll do it again if that's what someone requests.
I'm just afraid that's just not a fair trial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when it's a possession of cocaine second offense, that makes it a felony. It's someone who's been here before.
Yeah.
They know what probation means. They know what it's going to mean for them. I don't do that on a sexual assault. I don't do that on a shooting.
Right.
You have to pick and choose where you feel comfortable. And I don't encourage my staff to do that.
Yeah.
But yes, we do try where we know it's somebody who shouldn't be sitting to do what we can. We'll bring to the court's attention, look, they've been sitting, they don't have a lawyer to file a bond motion, but maybe we could address bond today.
Nice.
And I won't object. When there's not a victim, that's a lot easier to do. When there's a victim, we have to have different considerations, obviously. So we try to work within the constraints we have. It's not The constitutional right to a speedy trial in a felony does not begin until you've had a preliminary hearing.
Mhm.
So we have to be mindful of that record. There is one case in Wisconsin, State versus Lee is the name of the case, that talks about what happens if someone's been in custody for too long before their preliminary hearing. And we, do what we can to make sure that the outline of that case is followed. But it is a difficult situation. It puts us in a difficult situation because I can't do my job effectively if I'm worried about the defendant and their custody time. And that's really shouldn't be my concern. That should be their attorney's concern. So it's a very difficult time. I can remember a time when everybody had a lawyer in a week and we could get some things done.
Wow. That's not this time anymore.
It's not. And when the legislature took away, when the legislature said that the state could put up any witness and hearsay was admissible in a preliminary hearing. Preliminary hearings are not particularly meaningful anymore because I put up one witness who just says, yeah, this person said this and this person said that, and it happened here on this day. Frankly, I think we could save ourselves all a lot of time and money if we didn't have them anymore. It's not a constitutional right to a preliminary hearing. It's a statutory one. So the legislature created it, they could take it away. And we could get people their discovery and get their cases moving faster, get you before a judge faster instead of a commissioner. I will tell you that the state public defender's office will fight that tooth and nail. And I doubt we'll get bipartisan support for that. So to me, it's a roadblock to the process.
Mhm. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's just
So
my thought, so
honestly,
that's my
yeah,
personal
that's
opinion.
fair. Thank you for that. Any questions from the youth committee?
Good.
You good? You good? DA, Trisha, thank you. Your hair
Yeah,
looks
good.
lovely today.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
My daughter's a hairdresser. I have an upper hand. I have an advantage on that one.
Oh, nice.
Um,
Very good.
But, my door's always open to you, to youth and governance.
I
You
love
want to
that.
see this process? Come on over. I'll take you to preliminary hearings so you can see what we do.
I actually
um,
would love to see.
Yeah, they're all public hearings. So,
Okay.
let me know if you're coming because I'd certainly walk you over and then answer your questions and
Okay.
try to make sure because it might be a little confusing if you just sat down. So,
Yeah.
to understand what we're doing,
Okay.
but I'd be happy to do
Well,
that.
thanks for that invite. I appreciate it.
Not just the committee.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
sure.
All right, let's move along. The next item and the last item on our agenda is a presentation from the Racine County Sheriff's Department, and it's an overview on our future plans, including the status update regarding the provisions of the police services to and within the village of Sturtevant. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Jim Widener, I'm the Chief Deputy with the Sheriff's Office, and with me tonight is Kelly Getzky, our Support Services Division Captain. So as you stated, we're here to have a discussion and to share information with you about the provision of contracted law enforcement services for the village of Sturtevant. So there's really two different contracts that we want to talk about a little bit tonight. The first and the primary one is the temporary contract for law enforcement services. That is what is currently moving through the board process right now. The second is the long-term contract for law enforcement services with the village of Sturtevant that we are currently in discussions with the village of Sturtevant about. So to kind of start things off, just talking a little bit about contracting for law enforcement services. So the sheriff's office has a long history of providing that service to the community. Municipalities, dependent on their size, are mandated to provide law enforcement services. So villages that reach over a certain population have to provide a law enforcement service. Cities have to provide law enforcement service. And then you have towns that do not have to provide law enforcement services, but oftentimes they choose to, and they want either full-time law enforcement services or just an enhanced version. So what we do is at a very cost-effective way to be able to provide those either mandated or desired additional law enforcement services. Currently, we hold 8 contracts with municipalities across the county of Racine, and they many of them have been in place in excess of 30 years. So that really is just in general contracting for law enforcement services. And one of the advantages of looking at the sheriff's office for providing those services is a lot of the infrastructure already exists. So when a municipality wants to or has to provide those law enforcement services, they really are just purchasing the front facing services, the deputies that would be working law enforcement within their communities. We have supervision, we have a lot of the infrastructure, we have HR, payroll, finance, corp counsel, everything that goes into having a larger organization that they don't have to pay all of those direct costs for. So we look at it as providing that service and making it available to the communities that are looking to provide that service. So um, currently tonight, we're here to talk about Sturtevant. So I'm just going to go through a short history and kind of how we got to the point where we're at. Sturtevant, for as long as I've been in law enforcement, has had their own police department. And that's how they've chose to provide their mandated law enforcement services to their village. Um, Earlier this year, the Sturtevant Police Department's chief at that time, he had retired. About the midpoint of this year, July 2025, the board reached out to the sheriff's office and started to inquire and wanted information about what contracting for law enforcement services would potentially look like. So we shared that information with them. We provided them examples of other contracts that we have with municipalities. And the follow-up to that came in August, and they asked us to come and provide a presentation at one of their public meetings for the village board on what contracting may look like with the sheriff's office, and then basically Q&A with the board. Now, when the village of Sturtevant started to explore this option, they asked us for contract numbers and to come and give a presentation. They also asked the village of Mount Pleasant to come in to provide numbers and to provide a presentation. So after all those presentations were completed and that information was shared with the village of Sturtevant, in early September, they made the decision that they wanted to continue on with their police department, and they hired a police chief, and basically discussions with us had stopped at that point in time. Late September, early October, we received communication from Sturtevant, and they had reconsidered their position at that point in time, and they wanted to now continue to move forward with contracting services with the sheriff's office, and start to work towards a more long-term contract to provide those services. So at that point, when they had reached out to us, we were in the full throes of the budget internally within the county. And actually on October 15th, when the sheriff's office had our scheduled public budget hearings, we did comment on this to the board at that point in time, because it was very new. They had just reached out to us, and we started to engage them in those conversations about developing a contract for long-term services. So very quickly, towards the end of October, October 30th, they reached out to us. Their goal was to maintain their police department while we discussed long-term contracting and then ultimately engaging in that, but keeping the police department in place to provide those law enforcement services until a transition could take place. But their department began to deteriorate at a very rapid rate. And on October 30th, they basically advised us that they were down to 4 officers that had been working without any time off for approximately the last month and a half, 2 months. And they wanted to know how soon we could take over law enforcement services. And obviously, we're again right in the throes of budget. The budget was voted on November 2nd. The next morning, we immediately started having conversations with Corp Counsel as well as finance to develop a temporary contract to act as a stopgap to provide those critical services to the village of Sturtevant while we continue to work on a long-term contract solution with them. And again, Supervisor Trottier, Chairman Kramer, I had conversations with both of them trying to come up with a plan on how we could move this forward as quick as we could. So this is partially why this is a little out of order as far as the sequence of this. And we went to FHR on November 5th, providing this information and a copy of the temporary contract and making a request to have that moved forward for first and then ultimately second reading coming up here next week. on the contract. But obviously, we did want to come forward and speak to government services to explain what was going on and have a discussion in regard to it. So that took place on November 5th. November 11th was first reading for county board. And then on the 15th, everything in Sturtevant kind of came to a head. The Sturtevant Police Department worked their last shifts, and they no longer had a police department to be able to provide law enforcement services to the village of Sturtevant. So the next day, November 16th, we began covering and taking calls for service within the village of Sturtevant. So tonight we're here to have this discussion with government services, and then it is scheduled for second reading before the county board next Tuesday on December 9th, and that is specific to just the temporary contract. So with the temporary contract, again, we worked with Corp Counsel and Finance in the development of the temporary contract, as we have with all of our law enforcement contracts. All the contracts we utilize within the sheriff's office, we do nothing in a vacuum. We work with our partners on developing them throughout. So with the temporary contract, it is asking for one deputy to work on overtime on each of the shifts. Again, just to cover those core services, to answer those calls for service that are coming in to dispatch and for to service the citizens of the village of Sturtevant. We are billing at top deputy overtime rate. So internally, and this is contractual within the Deputies Association, how we allocate overtime, there are specific mechanisms that it has to go through. So we can't say it's specifically going to be like a step 2 or a step 5 deputy that will always take the overtime. So we are billing at top rate for that overtime, because some deputies will be younger. So it may go all the way up through investigators and supervisors that are filling some of that. So that is a way to balance out those costs that will be incurred. There is no additional manpower that's needed for the temporary contract. It truly is just meant as a stopgap while we continue to have the conversations and work towards this longer term contract with the village of Sturtevant. We did modify some of the contractual language because of what occurred with them internally degenerating to the point where they couldn't provide their own services before we had moved the temporary contract through. So we have added language with the assistance of Corp Counsel to be able to back bill to the 16th of November when we first started having to take their calls for service. The temporary contract is for an initial 30 days. There is the ability, if it's agreed upon by both parties, to extend the contract in 1 month increments for a total of 5 months. And again, the goal is just while we do this, we're parallel, we are working in discussion with them on the longer term contract. So when we were here the last time for FHR, let me just back up real quick. So the temporary, that's pretty much it for the temporary contract. As we continue to have conversations about the longer term contract, that will be an entirely new process that will be started all over again once we can go back and forth between the village of Sturtevant, their council, the county, our council, and once an agreement is tentatively reached on both sides with the contractual language, then we will come back before this body, before government services, before FHR, first and second reading of county board, to be able to approve that longer term contract. So really on two fronts. One, because it would be looking at a multi-year contract. The time frame we're looking at in the longer term contract is 5 years. And the other component is that we would need the authorization from the board to hire additional deputies to be able to service that contract for the village of Sturtevant. So going back, when we were here for FHR, I know there was multiple questions surrounding liability and concerns about liability. And unfortunately, Michael Lansdorf from Corp Counsel wasn't here that evening to address some of those. But we did have follow-up meetings with Corp Counsel after the FHR meeting. And again, I just go back to all of our contracts are developed in conjunction with Corporation Counsel, outside counsel, including our law enforcement contracts. So there is in the contract a line item for public liability. So it's in all of our contracts, and it's 2.5% of the total cost of manpower. This goes to help offset into a public liability account that is kept by the county. So there is a line item that is in our contracts that does address some of that. But ultimately, the staff is ours that are providing these law enforcement services. They are county staff. We cannot give away the liability. So looking at what was brought up at that time was like splitting and sharing more of the liability is not a legal possibility when it comes to contracting for these services. Really, the village of Sturtevant and every other municipality that we contract with, they're entering into that contract for us to provide these services, and they're really buying that time from us to be able to do that. That being said, we do have language within the contract that does address some kind of more peripheral liability. One component is for any municipality, their specific ordinances. If there is ever any type of lawsuits that are centered around their ordinances where they are potentially deemed unconstitutional, and then the subsequent actions there's lawsuits on, they would be liable for any kind of trickle down from their ordinances. And then also prior to us coming in and entering into a contract with any municipality, they would be responsible for anything that would result prior to us actually entering in and executing that contract. So with that, I will open it up to any questions that the board has.
Committee? Any questions? Okay, very good. Yeah, Supervisor Price.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Is the 2.5% of the contract for liabilities seem adequate? I don't know what that number
So
is
that
off
number
the top
was
of my head.
developed in conjunction with Corp Counsel and Finance based off of the public liability insurance that the county, the county procures. And that is the allocation, basically per position that we bring on.
All right, and then, related, we're not trying to make money on this, but we do want to make sure we break even. So besides just the, hourly rates and mileage, how is the administrative overhead handled?
So there is a 5% administrative fee that is applied to each of our contracts. So it scales up or down with the overall size of the contract. So some of our smaller contracts, say the town of Dover versus a larger contract like the town of Burlington, would pay appropriate to the amount of service that they were receiving. And that is used to help offset those costs such as administration, supervision, software, other equipment.
To training.
Mhm.
And history has shown that's an adequate amount, it adequately covers if you roll all that up, it's covered.
So the 5% is administrative fee is a newer fee that we've implemented prior to this past year.
Okay.
That fee has not existed in our contracts.
Okay. It's a good addition. Thanks.
You have a question? Supervisor Hoffman?
I know we had a conversation privately before the meeting, but kind of want to bring it up as a thought process that I had. Because in our previous budget meetings that we had dealing with the county was hiring and retaining our deputies. It could be anywhere from 9 months to a year for training. And so one of my questions tonight before the meeting was, in the contract moving forward, temporary and moving forward into a more of a full-time actual 5-year contract, I think is what they're looking for. Are our fees in this contract going to cover what we're going to need to do in overtime to cover till we have new officers hired and trained, ready to hit the road? And I was assured that that is being seen in the contract and spelled out in what they're going to be paying. It might be like a tier system. As time goes on, this might be a little different. I just wanted the committee to know that, because that was one of my big concerns. I want to make sure, just like Supervisor Presker just said, I want to make sure that we're at, level board here, and that's not going to cost the county for the coverage. But another question I did have that I did not ask was, I know Christmas train, which I think is this week or next week, 4th of July or 3rd of July, they have a huge presence of public coming, which took every single officer Sturtevant had to try to cover that. And I think the Memorial Day parade's back, where they try to go down, run down Highway 11. How does this affect Has that all been talked, discussed, and in the perimeter of how this contract's gonna be written out?
Yep, so special events, kind of standardized special events such as the holidays and things like that. This is something that exists in every municipality throughout the county for the most part, and we always assist with taking care of that and from a staffing and a coordination and a planning perspective. So they have asked about that, and we said absolutely, we will cover all of that. They'll have obviously some of the discussion on the longer term contract, they're looking at various coverage levels. But and those are to provide those core services day to day on each shift. Now, when you have special events, the sheriff's office already assists a lot of the municipalities with this. So like some of the events you brought up, like the fireworks, we were already providing anywhere from 6 to 8 deputies every fireworks to help augment the village Sturtevant into for providing that service, as well as the Christmas train, which is next Tuesday. So we'll continue to do that. That is just part of the contracting with us, is that will handle those situations and appropriately plan and make sure that it's staffed appropriately.
And then there was one more question I just came up with. My understanding is when our two deputies are on per shift, that they are using the police department, existing police department, building
Mhm.
in Sturtevant. Is there gonna be any added, as we're trying to redo our radio system, we're changing cams on our officers, putting them into the squad cars, we're talking 10 more officers. Is all this gonna be covered in the contract? Is that the county's not gonna be responsible for the added body cameras, the added cameras in the vehicles? I'm sure you can have some kind of radio system or something in that building and is there gonna be something there for communication?
So there's a couple different pieces that you have there. So for the radios, the county is providing radios to every municipality, law enforcement, fire. The county is paying for that with that project. So those radios were already allocated and earmarked for the Sturtevant Police Department. We are just reallocating them back to us to provide once this goes through permanently, and if the authorization comes for executing and entering into the long-term contract and the hiring of these additional officers, those radios are already shifted over and available for us at no cost within the existing radio project budget. As far as some of the additional equipment, there is additional equipment that's necessary if we're hiring 10 new deputies. And that is also worked into and covered underneath the 5% administrative fee to allocate and cover whether it's hardware equipment or it's software. There's a variety of software that we utilize. So those costs are assumed underneath that 5%.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Trotter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim, Kelly, this is like the third time. You've answered many of my questions at the FHR meeting. We've had discussions over the last, well, within the last 2 weeks. And you've answered the questions tonight, specifically the liability issue, the software issue, and the administrative issue. So I'm going to tell you at this point in time, you've answered my questions, and thank you for your thorough explanation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Trotter. Youth? Supervisors Spencer or Rossi, do you have any questions? Supervisor Rossi? Could we note Supervisor Spencer and Rossi in attendance, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I guess it's more so a comment on process, and I understand the urgency and the timeline for providing services to the village. But my understanding of state statutes requires that there to be a contract in place for us to engage in these services. And it's confusing to me that I saw on the village's website and also the former Sturtevant Department's Facebook post that Racine County is providing these services when the board has never seen or approved this contract. And I understand the rush in this, but I still remember seeing, posts about selling Sturtevant, police vehicles and items like that. And I actually went to one of the Sturtevant meetings where this was talked about, which one of the ones you mentioned. I think it was right after the sheriff's department gave the presentation. So I guess I'm kind of shocked that this wasn't brought to the board's attention sooner, as it was being discussed thoroughly in Sturtevant. And, for the people that wanted to go to those meetings, they could see that. I guess I'm frustrated with the process of this one, because we're technically providing services without a contract right now. Unless I'm mistaken, please correct me. Thank you.
Do you have
Sure.
any
So-
response?
The situation, the way that it developed was less than ideal. Like I said, they first reached out to us in July, asking for and doing information seeking on what contracting looked like. We gave presentations. They ultimately decided not to enter into contract services at that point in time. Things developed within Sturtevant, where they changed their mind, and then they re-engaged with us in October, right around the budget time. And then the goal at that point was to work with them on developing a long-term contract and then doing a transition over to providing law enforcement services. But due to the exigency that was caused by the deterioration of their department, the leaving of staff, and getting to the point where they said they did not have the ability to provide law enforcement services anymore, that was what caused us to come forward and to look at entering into a temporary stopgap contract. And again, in conversations with both Chairman Kramer as well as Supervisor Trottier, trying to see how rapidly we could look at moving that through the board to have a contract. Ideally, we want a contract in place to be able to provide those services, but those two timelines did not align. So we're in a position where the village of Sturtevant had no law enforcement coverage. The citizens of Sturtevant continued to call 911 and request law enforcement services. The sheriff's office, we are the only entity that has jurisdictional coverage in that area. So the alternative to us not responding to those would be the citizens of the village of Sturtevant calling 911, asking for assistance, and nobody being there to respond to those calls. Now, due to that, we have worked with Corp Council and with the village of Sturtevant, because this has gotten out of alignment and put into the contract to be able to back bill so that we can recoup those costs going back to the first day that we had to start taking those calls for service there.
Thank you again, Chair, for that, allowing me to speak. I understand the urgency, and that's not the issue. It's just it's a matter of process. And when I'm reading the state statute right here, and it's saying that, one of the sheriff's responsibilities is enforce all city or village ordinances in a city or village in which the sheriff provides law enforcement services under a contract described under section, I'll save that for later. It's confusing to me that in FHR, liability questions can be brought up, and that without a contract, the sheriff's department still moves forward with these items. I understand urgency. I really do. It's shocking to me, though, that this still happened without board approval. I understand that, they had minimum staff or whatnot, but there's at least some, and I'm not a law enforcement officer, but on the outside, when a department via their village, they start getting rid of equipment, they were selling vehicles, that indicates some level of plan to me. And I don't really understand, how we get to this point where we're putting the contract together after we've already really started with services here. So again, it's an issue with process. I brought a few items up like this before, so I'm really hoping that this moving forward, this just doesn't happen. I'm thinking that these contracts should come up well before the decision is made on them, instead of the decision's made and then now the board gets to decide this. Another supervisor had brought this up to me, that this is how the process has always been, where, the negotiations happen and then this is brought to the board. Well, this is a little different from that. And then to that point, I would say that, I'm tainted by the private sector. When you're writing a contract, usually you're working with the authorizing authorities to make sure that they're okay with the contract. And maybe that's why I have such an ease in this process, in that I'm seeing the decision is made and acted on, and then it's brought to the authorization entity to approve after the fact. And maybe that's not right. I'll have to admit that, because I'm used to the private sector. But it's just hard for me to understand and accept that that's okay just because now we're in government. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Supervisor Wassey. And now maybe if I can just, my understanding off of that, and then I'd ask for clarity. I heard not only you, Sheriff Schmeling, talk about the constitutional and statutory duties of the sheriff's department, having to enforce the entire county. And so if a municipality is without their own police department, the duty exists regardless if there's a contract. But where the contract, I believe, has a very important piece is that without the contract, the sheriffs that are providing these basic constitutional duty coverage, the taxpayers now are subsidizing that service. So we're not getting any financial compensation. And now with this addition to this temporary agreement, it's basically saying, yes, let's get this contract through so then we can make ourselves whole. So then the taxpayers aren't subsidizing it. And what Supervisor Rossi is talking about, we wouldn't have to be retroactive. So I think this is more so, I don't know if it's on the sheriff's department, if it's on the county board's end of things, where this should probably have been first and second reading, or it should have been an emergency meeting. That's how I see it. And I don't really see it on you. You guys just have to do what you have to do. You have to cover how I see it, but you guys can correct me. As a sheriff's department, you're mandated to have to cover it. We just want our money to make us whole. And I would suggest moving forward when you have the 5-year long-term contract, I would like to see, so I say this with the chair of finance, to make sure that that meeting then is a joint meeting between government services and finance, just so it doesn't, I feel like this is so much redundancy on your part. I mean, I'm glad we're here to talk about it again. The more times we can talk about it, the more opportunities to ask questions. But I think just for that, and am I understanding it correctly? And I don't know if I'm understanding it at your end either, but that's how I'm seeing it.
Yes, we do have
Okay.
jurisdictional responsibility. There is no other primary law enforcement entity to provide those services for the village of Sturtevant. So the sheriff has that obligation to provide those services. So again, now, is this a normal course of business? No, it's not. So it doesn't occur, or at least in my career, it has not occurred at a very rapid rate where we enter into larger scale contracts such as this. The town of Burlington was probably the last large contract that we entered into. And it does take place over time, longer negotiations, discussions on how things go, and then bringing it to the board, and then a very controlled migration, moving things back and forth after the ultimate authorization. The board has the absolute authority to give us authorization to enter into any multi-year contract to, if, just as like with this situation, we need to hire bodies, you have to authorize that for us. Right now, because of the position that Sturtevant was in, where they did not plan on their department collapsing as rapidly as it did, it put us into an exigent circumstance. Why? And that is why we reached out and we made a request to move the temporary contract through the board as rapidly as possible. So we did have a contract in place. So we were recouping the costs that we were incurring by covering the temporary contract with the overtime rates. So we still have that ability now with the contract that we have, because we have built-in language to be able to backbill from the time that we've had to start doing that. but that temporary contract that is more of an exigent circumstance than it is a normal course of action. What will occur with the 5-year, the longer term contract will follow more of a normal course of action with entering into a contract with a municipality where it will go through the process of government services, FHR, first and second reading on the board prior to any authorization and execution of a multi-year agreement and or hiring of additional bodies to be able to service that contract.
Thank you. Supervisor Preisker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If I can maybe just clarify my understanding too, and maybe address Supervisor Rossi's questions. If the county is the law enforcement service provider of last resort for the county. The parade of horribles, or in theory, is every underlying municipality could decide at any moment to disband their local law enforcement and put it all on the county with no contract in place. And we would be forced to provide that essentially with no contract or at no cost to the local municipality. Now, they don't really want that to happen because the villages of a certain size and the cities have their own statutory obligation to provide the service. So they need to contract with the county to at least meet their statutory requirement. And the other reason they want to do it is because I think the whole contract negotiation is deciding the local service priorities that they want in exchange for that contract. So if they want extra service for special events, or if they want, certain numbers of shifts and coverage, because in theory, I guess you could have one person covering. They could just be serviced by the county area patrol that's already covering the area. So I don't think and I agree with you from being a board member standpoint. I also feel like I'm kind of on the dark on it, right? I'm just hearing on the side that Sturtevant decided to do this, and we're talking with them, and I don't know what either side is talking about. Um, and I do want to know that, but I assume there's some reason why, because I guess once we talk about it as a board, everything's a big public document and record. And I think part of the negotiation is that it's not to that point yet. But I'm not confident in how that works. So yeah, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's, right now we basically have to provide the service, and the contract is just really a statutory requirement for the underlying municipality to have, so that they can pick the service levels that they want. And we're just hoping to cover our costs for providing that service.
Correct.
Supervisor Rossi.
Thank you again, Chair. And I will try to be as brief as possible. I don't mean to commandeer this. I'd like to just make a distinction, because one of the mandated aspect of what the sheriff's department has to do is there are county ordinances, and then there are and there's state statutes and federal law that is their obligation. Cities and then villages over 5,000 in population are required to provide their own law enforcement or contract in a specific language in state statutes on how a city is to abolish its police force if it were to contract with another entity like the sheriff's department. So the obligation they have no obligation to write municipal ordinance citations. That comes with contracting, and that's exactly what, I believe it's 59. But that is exactly what 59.27 talks about in the state statutes, is that the ability and then the obligation comes for municipal enforcement under 59.27, section 13, which is enforce all city or village ordinances in a city or village in which the sheriff provides law enforcement services under a contract. So that's the distinction that I'm trying to make here, is that they're absolutely right. They have to, in any municipality right now, if there's a state issue, a federal issue, a county ordinance issue, then they can do that. Then there's overlapping ordinances for county and then certain municipalities, like there's county, um, there's certain violence crimes that we have on the county side where we have ordinance for that they can cite. And there's similar ones on municipalities' ends that they can cite. So then they have the opportunity, if they're contracted, to pick, if we're going to pick a county violation or if you're going to pick a local municipality violation. But it becomes a requirement for local municipal violations once there's a contract. So I just want to make that distinction. 100% there is the requirement for county and state, And federal items, well, not federal, excuse me, I should say state, that's not federal. But the municipal ones come up under contract, especially the requirement and to have law enforcement is villages over 5,000. That's it. Thank you.
Can I comment to
Thank you
that?
for that clarity. Yeah, please.
So yes,
Deputy
just to
Chief.
clarify, we are not writing Village of Sturtevant ordinance violations at this time. We do not have a contract with them. We are enforcing state and county. And as you heard, the district attorney, comment, on kind of the routing of various types of citations, whether they come down to her or they go to the local, municipality, and their local judge. So as an example, Union Grove, Town of Burlington, we have the option to write underneath their ordinance violations, and we do, and that's part of the contract for the lower level offenses. But what's going on right now in Sturtevant, because we do not have a contract, we are not writing their ordinance violations at this time.
You're right, you're not writing parking tickets and noise violations. I mean, well, Sturtevant is also a violation there.
They have a temporary chief right now that they hire. Now, again, there is no case law that ultimately says, although they have a legal obligation to provide law enforcement services, what that law enforcement service level needs to be. And this is the murkiness that we get into when we're providing these services. So this is somewhat of a trick bag that could develop, would be that they hire one person that works Monday through Friday, they enforce the municipal ordinance violations and whatever else they want to, and then anything else that comes in, we end up taking. And they could argue potentially that they're meeting their statutory obligation providing law enforcement services. My interpretation of that, I think it's the interpretation I would take with that. If you are required to have law enforcement services, it's 24/7, 365 law enforcement services, but there is no case law that clarifies that of what that level is. So to your point, Supervisor Preisker, could some municipality decide, hey, we're gonna hire a guy Monday through Friday, they're gonna take care of our meeting stuff, they're gonna handle minimal stuff, and then we're just gonna say, anything else that comes in around the clock is gonna go to the sheriff's office, and we would be in a position where we'd have to start responding to that? Potentially. Could you potentially file suit challenging that? You potentially could. Where that would go, like I said, as of right now, there's no case law.
Two things. One, I just want to say thank you. The feedback I have received and what I have witnessed in Sturtevant, Sheriff Department, you're doing a great job of filling that gap. There's obviously a lot of upset residents and taxpayers that wanted what they had. Change is hard for them, but it's good to see the protection being around the village. I guess my other point that I just want to kind of say that what caught me and caught some of the other supervisors off kilter was you wake up one day and it's on Facebook and it's on Channel 4, 6, and 12 News. None of it, we all knew that there was a discussion that Sturtevant was looking for possibly going with Sheriff's Department or Mount Pleasant. One moment they're, hiring a chief, going to keep their department, but then all of a sudden one day you wake up and you find out they're disbanding their police department effective October 16th, I believe. So we weren't prepared as county supervisors for the phone calls and the emails. And so that's where I'm caught off guard. And I'm sure other supervisors were the same way. We didn't have the answers. We didn't know. So we were just as taken back as anybody else. So I'm kind of hoping, as much as this wasn't the right sequence, I hope if this ever happened again, that we have a better way of communicating among our board. Be prepared to answer those questions. Does that make sense?
Definitely, that's fair. Supervisor Spencer, you have anything? Yeah, you're welcome. Good. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, just we appreciate your time and having us here.
Yeah, thank you. Just a one last final thing, and not to say that you were in the position to know it, but maybe Jamie, I'm just curious of what Sturtevant's budget looked like in 2026 in regards to their law enforcement. Was there anything that's in there? I'm hoping we can be made whole because right now we are subsidizing the Sturtevant taxpayers. So are you privy to how their
What
budget was
their
laid out?
law enforcement budget was.
For 2026?
I do not know for
Okay.
2026 what they ultimately budgeted. So, I mean, we have provided them, with tentative, what numbers would look like. Obviously, those change and they're direct costs. So really, as our contracts, such as the Deputy Sheriff's Association, which we were here at FHR last night, to begin moving forward, that is going to have a direct impact on what the costs are for our contract, because that's really the core of it. It's the manpower that's associated with it. But we have explained that to everybody, all of the municipalities that contract with us, that we were out for negotiations. We anticipated cost increases, and we advised everybody that we anticipated what was being built into the budget for 26 for the county was a 4% increase for the deputies association. And then the years beyond that, we didn't know at that point in time where they would end up settling at. But with our contracts each year, there is a new contract component spreadsheet that goes along with it that breaks down all of the new costs based off the contracts. And there's a number of figures in there that change that are beyond the county's control. All of the benefits, WRS, things like that, those change every single year. So there's always each year, although it's a multi-year contract, there is a fresh spreadsheet that is provided that accounts for all of those new numbers so that they can budget appropriately.
Thank you for that. I would assume that Sturtevant would want to move forward quickly because they're paying quite the premium rate right now. So I would assume that we'd be seeing this maybe sooner rather than later, rather than the 5 months out, that
Yes, that
maybe it
is
can.
absolutely the goal. We are in communication with them as we speak. Things are moving positively. There are no issues. It's just making sure that they clarify what their needs are and that we can make sure that's all incorporated into the contract and that what they're looking for from a service level, that's really the largest driver for the contract,
Yeah.
is being met. And then once we have that completed, then we'll be bringing that back before you. I would speculate that would be in the early portion of this next year that we'll be back starting to share all of this information, answering questions surrounding the contract very soon.
Yeah. Thank you for coming before another Racine County Board Committee.
Absolutely.
And we really appreciate it. So thank you. And I'm sure that all of us supervisors know how to get a hold of you, and especially the youth and governance rep. So, all right, thank you ever so kindly. It looks like without any other questions, we have exhausted our agenda, but before I adjourn the meeting, I just want to make a quick note, which I guess would have fall under chairman comments. Our youth and governance numbers for our nomination process is quite low. So any of you who may be a mentor, please reach out to your mentee and try to help them in their schools to get more nominations. Or if you know in your district, if there is a school, a high school, reach out and get those nominations. All right, thank you. We are adjourned.